There is a certain impact that I foresee Legion having on not just businesses that are customers, but also on frontline workforce and experiences and how these jobs are evolving. Whether that impact comes through Legion being successful or whether that impact comes from that model being successful, it doesn't even matter who else implements that model, right? I think that is victory to me personally and to Legion.
And welcome to the Venture to Victory podcast, where we look at the entrepreneurial journey from startup to exit. And I'm super excited today. We've got a great CEO and founder, Sanish Mondkar, joining us, who is the founder of Legion Technologies. Sanish, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Well, we're both in the same time zone and same geography, so we're experiencing a pretty nice day, which I can't say for everybody on the East Coast necessarily, but we're going to try to bring sunny California to the world today. So, Tanisha, it's really a pleasure to have you on board. I think your story is really fascinating. Of course, like half my guests, there's the origin from a different part of the world, starting out, coming here to get an education, ultimately building an incredible company, kind of the American tale. But I'd love to do an intro in case people are not familiar with you. So let's rock and roll. Sanish Mondkar, you are the founder and CEO of Legion Technologies, an AI-driven workforce management platform company headquartered in Santa Clara, California. Legion Technologies was founded in 2016 and delivers intelligent automation for scheduling, forecasting, time attendance, compliance, and employee engagement for an hourly workforce. Long sentence. We're going to talk about exactly what that means. But the company's raised close to $145 million in institutional capital. Some of the investors include Norwest Venture Partners, First Round Capital, XYZ Ventures, Workday Ventures, and NTT, Docomo Ventures, and there are others as well. I just can't mention them all, but obviously lots of interest. Legion was recently on the 25,000 list of fastest growing private companies, adding 188% 3-year annual growth rate, actually making its fourth consecutive year on that list. And today the company serves many large employee customers like Dollar General, Cinemark, Circle K. Makes sense with all the hourly employees. We experience that every day when we go to the movie theaters or we go to buy something at the kind of the retail store. Prior to founding Legion, you held executive product roles, including chief product officer at SAP and Ariba, and you're responsible for products that generated more than $1 billion in revenue. Nish has a Bachelor of Computer Engineering from Pune University and a Master of Computer Science from Cornell. Wonderful to have you here.
Great to be here.
So, Sanish, let's start off with kind of the big question of the day, which is really what's going on with SaaS. If you pull up YouTube, all you're going to see is SaaS is dying, SaaS is dead, valuations are plummeting. And this is all derived from agentic AI, and certainly things have been happening over the past couple of weeks with OpenClaw. But this idea that the lifetime value of a customer, which is the lifetime cash flow from a traditional SaaS company, that's unpredictable now because the world is changing so quickly. And in the agentic age, do we need big corporations creating SaaS platforms when we can do it ourselves and have it customized? But in your case in particular, I would say it seems like AI and the ability to get data from massive analytics is actually kind of at the core of your business, to predictability aspect of when is business going to be strong? How many employees do I need? And with labor being so much of a component for these large corporations, I just want to get your perspective on the SaaS market and how you fit into it.
Yeah, so I think we're all seeing what's happening in the public markets right now with, the valuations of many SaaS companies shrinking entire sectors. I think there is some interesting merit to that perspective of how much of that business AI native companies are going to acquire and in what shape or form. I think there are some categories of SaaS companies where it is extremely feasible to build bespoke solutions by IT organizations of enterprise customers, and they get exactly what they built, and they'll probably be happy with it. There are other categories of SaaS software where It is extremely mission critical. There is many of our customers, for example, Legion's customer, they don't just value the fact that we have build something that's mission critical, but they also value the fact that many others are using it, and hence that gives them confidence that they can use it safely and they can derive value from it. So the fact that it's a shared software by many large organizations increases the confidence, increases the robustness, increases the security, the capabilities, and all of those things. So there is that component too. So it really depends on where a particular SaaS company stands in terms of the spectrum of how critical it is, how feasible it is to build it using just AI agents and things like that. That's one facet of it, right? The other facet is it's not a either or. We have a SaaS software, which is a workforce management platform. We are also building agentic workflows. So we are saying, okay, here's what you get as a part of our software, but but there are things that are unique to you as a customer that we can develop agents for. And that way you can get sort of best of both worlds. You can get this tried and tested platform that has very deterministic results. And then you got your layer of agentic AI on top that creates all these workflows that are very unique to you as a business. So that is where we believe likely the probability of many of these larger SaaS companies are going, and it just makes a lot of sense to us. And this whole thing about SaaS versus AI and all those things, just it's a little bit of sort of overreaction to what ultimately is going to be customers going to use the right things for the right type of uh, mission critical use cases, as well as the right tool for the right problem.
So I think in terms of financing,
Yeah,
because that's a big question, and I've had friends personally that have really debated whether they should go out to the market, do a private equity recap, all these different things, because they wonder, is this just a temporary issue, like you said, where there's a lot of FOMO in the marketplace and valuations are dropping, but if we just kind of wait it out, maybe people will come to their senses, as you just said, and realize, well, this is really isn't a death spiral. What this really is an opportunity for companies to capitalize on that as well. You found a way through the agentic AI to now take the platform and personalize this around the specific needs of each individual customer, which is what their exciting part is as well.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
The timing depends on the category of the software and other things. There are SaaS companies, like I was saying, where the threat of fully bespoke solution built by AI is very high.
Yeah.
And if you're building a SaaS company in those categories, I think you should kind of rethink the whole strategy.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt like the huge players, they have so much capital, they're going to dive into this and be in front of everybody, and they're going to present that immediately to their clients. And the smaller customers, even though it seems so simple, you watch a video and it's like you just download Claude and you're ready to go. It's never that easy at all,
It's
right?
not
You
that
have to have
easy
a
at all.
team of people that know what they're doing. It's just like starting
Absolutely.
any
Yeah.
other business, right? And somewhere in the middle, maybe there's a pocket of problems, but I kind of feel like there's a little bit of FOMO out there around this. So, but
100.
you built an amazing company, and we're excited to hear
Thank you.
that. I wanted to switch a little bit to you personally because this podcast in particular is really about success stories from people who've been there for a long period of time, several decades, who've seen people come and go, but have also experienced success multiple times over. Your experience is a little bit different. You're not the traditional entrepreneur that got two friends, raised $5 million when you were 25 years old and just went right into it. You held these enormously important and high level positions at large companies. You have resources, you have processes in place, and you no doubt were highly compensated at that level. What made you decide, with all that opportunity, I'm going to take this risk and start a company on my own?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I, get asked that question quite a lot because it is a different path to founding a company. I think the shortest answer I can give is I was compelled by the problem statement. I had no interest in necessarily being an entrepreneur. That wasn't the plan when I left SAP. It wasn't, I didn't tell myself that let me go and build a company. It was really the problem statement that kind of compelled me. Actually, it's funny. Initially, when I came out of SAP and I started looking at software that benefits labor, right? Which is what we are now building workforce management. The initial draw was just curiosity and like, why isn't there a company of like, like Salesforce or some very large company that has basically built the right capabilities for labor and has grown their market share. And that makes logical sense because labor is everywhere. There are 2.4 billion hourly workers in the world and growing. So there's surely a market there. And that intellectual curiosity, in figuring out just enterprise software that are players in the space and all those things, very soon led to a completely different perspective that I started to see, which is the experience of the frontline workers. And the experience of frontline workers in all these jobs is not excellent, as we know. They are low-paying jobs. They are tough jobs. They oftentimes employees have to make these frontline workers, as they are called. They have to make they need multiple jobs to actually make a living wage. It's
Right.
very stressful. There are things like we've all had retail jobs where it's three strikes rule, and so it's a very tough job, especially for the amount of pay. And then as a technologist, you ask yourself, like, well, all this innovation that has happened in the world of enterprise software and HR tech and all these categories and acronyms that have been defined since then, how much of that innovation benefited the frontline workers directly? And you come to like almost a non-existent answer. And
Yeah.
even this category called workforce management that existed before Legion was designed to manage the cost of that workforce and optimize the cost, not elevate the experience. So, in other words, the workforce management category wasn't built for the workforce, right? Then I saw the industry at large was paying for that, ignoring the frontline workers by very high turnover rates. You see, there's over 100% turnover rates in QSR, 70% in retail. That's crazy. Imagine you're working for a company where 100% of the people are leaving every year. I mean, it's mind-boggling that we think that's normal, right? So those are the things that were sort of during that whole phase of discovery and intellectual curiosity of this category. I came to the conclusion that wow, there is so much of opportunity here to make a difference. Not even about building a successful company and all that stuff that came later. It's to make a difference. And then initially, I started looking for possibly entrepreneurs who I can fund to to start to start this company. But ultimately it was just like I had just such a high degree of conviction that one of my mentors at that time just said, hey, if you really want this to be done and done right, you got to get off the fence
Yeah.
and go and make it happen. And that's basically how Legion was founded.
Yes, it was the approach you took. The traditional human resource productivity software is based around managing costs and profitability for the company. But you're looking at it from how can I make the experience better for the worker? And then in return, what is the actual cost of the high turnover rate? Because nothing's
Absolutely.
worse than losing an employee, right? You think of the emotional time you take to go through and find that person, train them, get involved, and then they're all gone. And you're constantly going through this cycle. What if you could cut that turnover rate in half? Was that like a big problem when you went and talked to the clients? Were they like, yeah, if you could help me stop churn by 20 or 30%, that would be super impactful for me. Not to mention the employees are happier because they're not leaving. You
I think the problem, as I soon discovered, was much more complicated because all these labor intensive businesses, they are running on very low margins, especially on the labor side. And so for them, efficiency and cost control is a big deal. So if you want to build workforce management that takes care of the workforce too, you can just focus on the pendulum can swing on that side fully. You have to first and foremost demonstrate that you can manage the labor deployment cost, meaning scheduling and how much labor you need by AI powered forecasting. So for example, imagine if you're running a store and I tell you, hey, next week, on any given day of the next week, I can tell you at any time of the day exactly how many customers will be walking in and moreover exactly what they'll be buying. If possible to forecast that, now you put yourself in a position to very accurately know how many people you need to service that demand, how many people, what roles, and all those things. So it's possible to have very advanced technology that can solve the problem for the businesses to be super efficient with labor deployment But on the employee side, what employees want is employees want to say in when they get scheduled because they may have another job or they may have something else. So now that you've figured out how many people you need with accurate forecasting and all those things, you can now turn around and through software ask your employees, okay, who wants to work on which day and what time? And now let's match the supply and demand. Now both
Yeah.
sides are happy. And if you
Yeah.
automate all these things, you can rinse and repeat this every single day, every single week. That's how sort of how you start building the foundation of two-sided value. And you're reducing labor cost in sheer dollars, but you're also reducing labor cost through reducing the cost of worker replacement.
Yeah. What type of increases, or I should say decreases in churn have you seen over time with some of your best clients?
Yeah, so we have this metric we track internally, not to sound very dramatic, but we call this employee engagement trifecta. And the, that is
I love it.
the reason why we call it trifecta is because it delivers the three things that frontline workers are looking for, right? They don't leave because of pay, even though pay is not good in all these companies or generally not good. But in most cases, when you analyze the data, an employee leaves a retailer or a quick serve restaurant or something and joins a similar business, they get paid exactly the same because his pay rates tend to get standardized. So if they are not leaving for pay, we should all be asking ourselves the question, holy shit, why are they leaving
Scheduling.
in these large numbers,
Yeah.
right? Well, they're leaving for three reasons. One is schedule flexibility, which is top of the list. This friction of scheduling is number one reason by far, like 90 something percent.
Yeah.
Then there is also the other experience. You can call it like self-service and things like that. We're talking about Gen Z, we're talking about millennials, we're talking about these generations being the dominant generation in these jobs. And if you don't have an app, if you don't have self-service capabilities, if everything needs to be negotiated with the manager and things like that, like when we used to do these jobs back in the day, that just is a no-no right now. And the third thing is, which is really rapidly rising up on the desirable list, is instant pay. After the shift is over, I should get at least a good portion of my pay, and you can leave some for taxes and garnishments on payday, but I should get the rest. We deliver those three things, right, to the employees, and for the customers who have turned on all those three things, we see close to a 35% drop in turnover, which is massive.
That
Yeah.
is absolutely amazing. It resonates with me because I have a bunch of kids and a lot of them are doing part-time jobs. And even though I think it's crazy they're making 20 an hour minimum wage here in San Francisco, the complaints they have are literally the exact three things that you just mentioned.
Exactly.
Pairing up the right people together, schedule flexibility is the number one thing. They're going to college, they've got to fix it out, they wanna have their personal time. Some of them are like, "Hey, I would love to work overtime or Sundays if it makes sense," and young people don't have much money. They don't wanna wait a long time to get their money because the bills have to be paid today. It's not like a
Absolutely.
salaried person who's older, so, and then you multiply that scale. I could see the use case why you felt so excited
Yeah.
about it. But so funny though, the typical story of, "I wanted to be the investor in the company, I just couldn't find anyone that had the passion and foresight about it that I did, so I built this huge company and raised over $100 million to do it." So very cool, very exciting. So let me ask you, there's that old saying that you can't teach a dog a new trick. But so when you left after having spent many, many years, in big corporations where it's highly structured, there's politics, there's processes, there's compliance, all the stuff that kind of big corporations need to manage themselves. What were some of the things that you had to unlearn when you became an entrepreneur, startup guy?
To That's a great question, and that's one of the things that when I advise, especially experienced people who want to start a company, the day one sort of shock that comes in and that lasts for maybe at least couple years in your system, depending on how many years of experience you're walking away from. It's like that much stuff you have to actually unlearn. But there's a lot of that stuff. I mean, working for an amazing company like SAP, you don't sort of realize how much of the company reputation carries you in the business, in real world, and things like that. It's a bit humbling that you leave a company like that and you're literally on the street, right? With no office and like doing WeWork and like we had this tiny office with me and two other early team guys. And we were like, wow, like that's like no windows, nothing. It's just a big change in everything. It's the setup. It's all the thing that you have to be personally responsible and accountable for, you got to get done. I was running the payroll runs for my company for a period of time. All the things, like, there's no task that's too small. Everything is measured in progress of the company, forward momentum, getting to the next milestone, and you gotta do hands, roll your sleeves up, and do everything. And I'll tell you this though, now that transition, now it's been many years for me at Legion, but after that initial sort of getting just used to, in many cases, shocked by, kind of, even sometimes questioning if I have the ability to actually do that. But once you get past that, I had such a great time. I don't think I'll ever go back to a large company.
That is great. Were
Yeah.
you, if I ask, were you married at the time when you made this transition?
No, I was not, and I'm still not. So that explains what I've been doing for the last 10.
Well, the good news is you don't have to carry all that guilt
Exactly.
around,
Yeah, that's
that
true.
family,
Yep,
children guilt. Because whenever I
that's
talk
right.
to
Yeah.
someone who is in that role and then they leave, the
Yeah.
first thing the spouse says is, "Are you crazy?" And then
Yep.
10 years later, they say, "Well, it was a great time, but I also I didn't get to invest the time I wanted with my children and wife," and they carry around the
I
sense of
totally understand
guilt.
that. Yeah.
So that's really an
I think
interesting
starting a company is
combination.
not, I mean, it's not a logical or rational decision. It has to be driven by emotions, and there has to be things that you are very much willing to walk away from or sacrifice. There's just no
Yeah.
question about it.
Did you feel a different sense of pressure? Because when you work for a big company, and
Yeah.
sure, you have people that depend on you, of course, and you can control whether they work for you or not, all these different things. But when you go out on your own and you start it, so much is when you bring in those new employees to join you or your team members, it's their belief in you above all about anything else.
Yeah.
There is a indebtedness, a sense of responsibility that it's a different type of pressure. As you said, making payroll from your own pocketbook. What was that like for you, and how did you learn to deal with that?
I think so it's also a great question. Initially, it was a confusing type of experience because on one hand, there wasn't pressure because I would sort of, in the back of my mind, I would say, okay, if this doesn't work out, I can always go back and do, like have a job, right? So that part wasn't there. But the part that was there were exactly what you said, which is both on the employee side and the investor side, the initial set of people who were willing to invest or join me or bet on me were doing it because of what I did in the past. So that was definitely something that I was very much aware of. And it was something that I really carried it as, I want to say, positive pressure, right?
Yeah,
Because it is something that it's great to, I mean, the pressure is a two-sided coin, right? That it could, depending on how you take it. But for me, it was more like, hey, I don't have to I should not be letting these people down, right? That's number one. And number two is, I always try to, and even till even now, when new employees join Legion, I want them to be mapped to the mission and not to me, because that way we are seeing the same thing. I mean, there are lots of good and bad days, way more bad days than good days when you're starting a company. And you need something that's you need a true north star of why you are doing this, what actually compelled you. And even if a a portion of that gets propagated to every single person who joins us, whether as an investor, whether as an employee, I think we are now rowing in the same direction. And the pressure, we are all feeling the pressure, we're also experiencing the highs. Like, that's a lot better way to also formulate the culture than it is, hey, join because it's me starting a company, or I did
yeah.
xyz things in the past, who cares? Yeah.
I think that's probably the most difficult thing that I've observed when talking with people as the company gets really, really large over time is
It
having the
is.
whole organization appreciate the mission. Because, yeah, after a while, you have so many employees and they're all in functions and there comes a way to make a living and have a career. But you don't have that same all in the rowboat belief system, chasing the
Yeah,
North Star, as you so eloquently said
for sure.
earlier in those early days. And have you missed that a little bit as you've grown, or have you felt like you still have that culture?
I think we still have that culture. Obviously, as more and more people join, it is harder. to keep that intact. And it's never going to be the same as the first five and the first 10 and the first 15, first 50 employees. But we make it a point to not just talk about it, but show it in many of our actions on like why we are, why the product is built in a certain way. Employees, frontline workers have a seat at the table in our product design and strategy, and why we are actually winning in the marketplace because of that, right? And uh, it's actually not a difficult thing to explain Legion's mission to anybody turning hourly jobs into good jobs. Like really simple. And here's how. People can relate to that very, very quickly. And then either you agree with it and you feel like it's a problem you want to help, or maybe it's not your cup of tea and you kind of move on. So it's been like we've by being very vocal and articulate about our mission, I think we also sort of it's a self-selection process too. We've attracted the right or at least the right type of people for us. And that continues to be a big driver for Legion.
Well, I think you also, as you shared earlier, there's something special about the nature of the business and why you even started it. Most people are, they join a company, there's a vision, they know they're serving customers and they want them to be happy. But kind of in front of everything else is you're not just serving customers, you're serving human beings
Right.
at those customers. That's the whole core business is helping them have better lives. Like, as you said, more flexibility in scheduling, better connections with demand, all the things that we talked about earlier. So as someone that wants to work for a company and be an employee, the fact that your whole mission was to help employees of other companies. And by helping your employees have, happy employees ultimately create good cultures and happy customers. I think that's a little bit somewhat endemic, and a little bit different than maybe some of the other companies that I've spoken to over the years.
Indeed.
Very, very nice. All right. So every startup founder, maybe you're the exception, has had a near death experience with the company or multiple near death experiences. Did you ever have that moment where, it almost came to an end, or there was the tidal wave hitting you was going to be so large, you honestly didn't know if you're going to make it? And then what did
Yeah,
you learn from that? Yeah.
that was COVID, by the way.
Yeah.
you know so I remember this is March 2020 or February 2020. We spent Me and my head of strategy at that time, we spent the entire month of February preparing our documentation and data room and everything for a Series B, and
Hmm.
we dispatched the documents through this, all the investors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And this COVID thing was just sort of looming at that point, hadn't exploded in the states, but this end of February, and we saw like very few investors were writing back, and we're like, "What's going on?" And then we start connecting the dots. So this is what's going on. All these stores are closing. All these restaurants are closing. That's our target market at that point. I was basically 100% of the market, and I remember a few investors wrote back and saying, "I don't think you guys gonna be around." Which at that point it's like I mean, it was such a black swan event. Fair to understand why they came to that conclusion, because all our customers are kind of shutting down, and there is no ETA on when they are actually going to be reopening. That it could take years, months, who knew. So that was a very humbling experience. We had to pivot very quickly to build tools like emergency communications and other things, where many of these customers or operators in these markets were struggling with just getting the word out to their stores or their restaurants, HQ. So we built some things that actually we said, hey, that's what we do. We build stuff for these customers and these markets. Let's see what they want right now. And then there were many other forward-thinking customers who said, hey, this is a great time to actually roll out Legion, because there's going to be minimal change management, and because when we come back up,
Yeah.
we're going to have a whole new staff.
Yeah.
So it was like there was a lot of figuring things out, and kind of just making progress with the cards that you're dealt with. But that was a great experience. I thought that in hindsight that was a great experience. It it taught us a lot. It taught us a lot. And like there are very, very few things that really can kind of break the foundation if you build a foundation right. If you got the right people, if you got the right you got a genuine intent to help customers in these markets, what you are doing may change, but there are plenty of things to do.
Yeah, I think also, I don't know how many people could actually anticipate kind of the whipsaw when we went back into it, right? Because what happened? There were labor shortages everywhere. There were lines
Absolutely.
everywhere. Shortages of product inventory. I remember with automobiles, rental cars at the grocery store, and the labor component was insane. Everything that you're talking about, how do we manage? How do we manage
100%.
turnover? And I'd also think that a lot of people, once they lost those jobs because of COVID, when time came to come back, they probably took different jobs because once you
Yes.
sit out, and those type of jobs where it's not like highly skilled, you can go to a lot of different places, and so having the ability to manage that and that turnover situation, I'm sure that you were able to provide a lot of value.
Indeed, indeed. And your whiplash point is spot on because after that, the business grew super fast because you see there's a the businesses, the customers came back. There was just a lot of focus on frontline work and experiences in stores and this and that. Employees started valuing employee during that period, like you said, took other jobs like DoorDash and other things, and they're like, "Wow, this is like, yeah, the skill profile is different, but I'm owning my schedule. I've got everything on my app. I get paid as soon as the shift is over." That actually elevated the expectations from employees even when they went back to retail and brick and mortar jobs. So all those trends post COVID really benefited us for sure.
Yeah, I love that idea of getting paid when your shift is over because that's kind of the promise of tokenization in crypto, right? That people could actually get paid every day as opposed to once a month or every 2 weeks. And it's interesting that you've already tackled part of very, very
Indeed.
cool. When you started the company, I'm sure you asked for a lot of advice from folks that you trusted, in your ecosystem. What was some of the best advice you got, and what was the some of the advice that you ignored?
I think one of the best early advice was to ignore valuations. And I know it's very hard to ignore because it's the most visible sign for many people of the material success that your company is going through. But valuations matter when you exit because that is real at that point. Before that, valuations are a distraction. And I've seen that to be an unnecessary obsession with, even employees and sometimes leadership teams and things like that. So staying focused on value creation, consistent to your mission statement and other customer metrics, the success that customers are having. We love looking at employee metrics, the employee frontline workers who served by the platform. We look at, app store reviews and, like all the other things, all the other data points are so much more compelling
Yeah.
than valuation. They ignored some advice and also in some cases regretted it, right? So, for example, it took me a while to understand what is the right profile of person who's going to be successful at Legion. I would hire a lot of people I worked with in the past because they're amazing people and no question, but it's a completely different company and different circumstances and different ingredients to be successful there versus a company like Legion, different space, different size. So over the years, I've learned to better pattern matching and different, impose sort of different requirements in my mind, and also to be pretty open to learning from others who have done similar things versus things that I feel like maybe are things that I may have in my mind, right? So those types of things. I've also advised around more recently. I'll give a very recent example too. I think this, and I'm sure I'm not unique in this regard, but uh, there is the picture of where AI is going and what AI can do right now and how to approach the transformation. There is a lot of active conversation between me and my peers and other people. And there's a lot of sort of, advice around even in the moment, like, hey, we just rolled out XYZ tool last week and here's the experience. Or also more importantly, how to manage people through this transition of turning the whole organization into AI powered, but everybody's role, everybody's job, everybody's responsibilities need to change. That there is just a big sort of openness, at least I have now, to listen, learn, and course correct.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of excitement for companies over productivity gains, but there's probably a lot of fear also amongst employees.
Yeah.
You're going to lose your job, or do I have to, how do I kind of re-up my skills to be able to succeed in this new world. I know everybody's kind of going through that. Was there any false belief about entrepreneurship that maybe you had before you took the leap that you discovered afterwards?
Well, I heard it was fun. I'm just kidding. I think the hard work and like there were things that almost everything was harder than what, outside and it appears to be.
Yeah.
Um, Enterprise software is hard. I knew that, but acquiring customers and making them successful, and then doing all this while watching funding and the between funding rounds and efficiency and things like that, and growing talent and a world class team. I mean, doing all those things are definitely not easy. It's not easy for others too. So I'm like, we're not unique in that way. But I think just the the there is a lot of I think that in the media, the celebration is of entrepreneurs is typically focused on a lot of successful stories,
Yeah.
and they have to obviously go through hard stuff too. But it's in hindsight, a lot of these stories appear to be amazing, right? And far more positive. I think there isn't enough focus on the companies and entrepreneurs who were not as successful but learned a lot of those lessons and had amazing products or amazing strategy or all the other things. I think that's uh, sometimes creates this illusion that this is just a fun job, or yeah, something that just looks very sexy.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's so many very successful entrepreneurs I've spoken to where this wasn't their first venture. They've had several other that they failed at. And what they did have was this mentality of, every failure gets me closer to success. Obviously, if I run out of money and I run out of ramen noodles and tuna fish, I'm going to have a problem. But I think I agree with you. People don't quite see it. I've been privileged living here in San Francisco to meet so many young entrepreneurs, and you see what they've really done, how they've got 7 almost maxed out credit cards, and they're living on mileage points and hotel points that they're borrowing from other people. They're just they're risking everything because they have this dream, and it's just a fascinating experience to be part
Yeah.
of, and so you have that group that is amazing, but then you have the group like yourself, people who are very, very successful, and they left the comfort, um, and the lifestyle that they had, which is not just, money, financial comfort, but a lot of it is prestige. After a while, you could do your job well, and if the recruiters are calling you probably all the time, and you could move from point A to point B and be paid well and have equity. But there's something inside of you that says, I need to do this. And that's what I think is the difference, that burning desire inside. So it's amazing. Listen, I always end this podcast because it's called the Venture to Victory podcast with a question. And that question is, what does it mean to you, Sanish, whether it's in business or life, to truly be victorious?
I think there is a certain impact that I foresee Legion having on not just businesses that are customers, but also, they just impact on frontline workforce and experiences and how these jobs are evolving.
Yeah.
Whether that impact comes through Legion being successful, or whether that impact comes from that model being successful, it doesn't even matter who else implements that model, right? I think that is victory to me personally and to Legion.
Yeah, that makes sense. As you said before, putting the vision above the individual, which is ultimately the outcome of the value that you're going to bring to whomever you're trying to serve. So, if only one day when it's all over, we go to that next realm, we can see how all those dots were connected and all the hourly workers all over the world that had this more wonderful life, and it can be connected back to you. Maybe that's the way it works. One day that maybe we'll be there together. We can discuss it. But this has been really amazing. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing these wonderful kind of words of wisdom with those who are, if you're a young entrepreneur thinking about taking that leap, or if you're someone who's always had that burning desire, but is trapped in the world of comfort and success they've created for themselves, but they still have that need to do it. It's going to be harder than you think, but as you said earlier, it was the most enjoyment you've ever had in your life, and you can't ever imagine going back. And I think that's a wonderful way to end it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Sanish. Appreciate you being here. Cheers, everybody.
The Venture to Victory podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you're interested in any of our open executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.